Janett Egber leads the Melbourne Chapter of the League of Intrapreneurs. So she is looking after all those people who have to deal on a day-to-day basis with the kind of problems that we have had many stories about just then. Without further ado, Janett, and you will see a couple of patterns in the speakers, and it's totally emergent and not planned, but a lot of them are from Melbourne, so we have rescued them from the footy madness that is descending on that city today. And a lot of them have a background in the financial industry and being accountants, and that seems to be an industry that not only breeds innovation, but also sort of makes people leave the organization. So, because a lot of the speakers that we have today have taken their destiny into their own hands, telling stories about what they learned along the way. Janett, take it away.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Kai. Thank you. I just want you all to think about trying to follow Pete's speak. So, bear a thought for the speaker that goes after Pete. Now, so very quickly, a little bit about me. So, yeah, some of those photos are over 40 years old. You might hear a bit of an accent, so I'll come to that in a second. Now, when I was born to a family of small business owners. And when I was growing up, I never really thought of, what I had, people ask you, what do you want to be when you're older? I never really asked myself, because as the eldest of two daughters, I was pretty much destined to run the family business, because that's what you do. So as you can hear a little bit of an accent, yes, I was born far away on the other side of the place. So I'm actually not missing the Melbourne footy, because I still don't get it. After 20 years, I was born in Mexico. Mexico City. And when you think of Mexico, I don't know what you think of, but sometimes I think of color and movement and mariachis and probably some of the Mexican food that might know, the enchiladas, chilaquiles, quesadillas, you name it, right? But sometimes probably some of the things that we don't think so much about, it's some of the issues that third world countries do face. As I was growing up in Mexico City, I would see this every day. I'd see this every day in the streets. The level of inequality, the poverty, and some of the really wicked problems that some of our societies face today. The issue that I face today is that when I was growing up, I was completely desensitized to this. This was just the way life was. Well, not anymore. Not anymore. And we're here talking about disruption and what's happening with large organizations. But a lot of the discussions that we have around intrapreneurship and the people that are leading change and innovation from within is not just about disruption and digital. And we just heard that it's not about technology. It's about the role the business needs to play in society today to solve some of the biggest problems. So it's way beyond just what is all about this digital disruption. What are we doing with it? What are we doing with the assets and the opportunities that we have in large organizations to drive this change? So this is what led me to connect with the Global League of Intrapreneurs. And I do want to change and start using that definition around intrapreneurship, because it's that intersection between purpose and impact, considering the innovation we can drive. So we heard a lot about the edge today and the misfits and the disruptors, the temper radicals and the dreamers that do. So it is about taking action. It's not just about talking. Absolutely, it's all about action. For me, when I heard about the League of Intrapreneurs, this is something that really resonated with me. So we just heard Pete talking about that entrepreneurial spirit from inside. It's harnessing the assets of the incumbent organizations, whether it's the brand, the innovation, the people, the money. What are we doing with it? So the framework that the Global League of Intrapreneurs is using is the UN Sustainable Development Goals. What are the SDGs that our organizations can align to start actually solving some of the biggest problems that we face in society? And we're not immune to it in Australia. I do live in Melbourne for about 20 years now, but there's a lot of issues around homelessness, affordable housing, you name it. There's a lot of problems that we do face here. It's not just a third world country issue. So just a little bit about my own entrepreneurship journey. Yes, I'm one of those corporate refugees. I did work at NAB for about 7 years. I left last year, but I spent about 10 years working in financial services, and before that, another 10 years in more your traditional market research, marketing strategy. So I could also be seen as a marketer myself. But for me, the penny dropped about 20 years later. As I said before, I was born and raised as part of a small business family. But what happened to me is as I finished my high school, I did take what you call here a gap year. And I was super fortunate to travel and spend about 2 years in a volunteer program, just living with different organizations, actually finding a bit more of what the world was really all about. And I remember at that time when I saw my parents in between some of the travels, I said, oh, look, it's great to see you here. But by the way, we have some news. We've decided to close the business and we're going to start afresh somewhere else. So what I thought it was going to be a bit of a year of traveling and getting to know, that basically completely changed my life. And I know when you've been in those moments that something triggers something really different. And for me, all of a sudden, the destiny of my life wasn't all clear. It was now up to me to see what I'm going to do with it. 20 years later, I find myself at NAB. And I was working as a strategic partnerships manager for small business. So what am I going to do with that? All of a sudden, I realized I might not have been there for my dad and my dad's business to help when I was in my late teens or close to 20. But I was in a role where I could impact about 500,000 small businesses. And I just started doing very different things because we had a bit of room to play. I mean, it was fun. Peter was talking about the Lloyd Digital Connect. We did a lot of research around that. What is the role of these organizations in helping with the productivity of small businesses? I did end up spending quite a bit of time in NAB Labs, work on a project that was even announced publicly. So I felt as an intrapreneur going through a lot of the politics and the issues around how do you drive influence? How do you get the executive sponsors? If you need a business case, what is the easiest way to get to? So a couple of the other stories, because I don't want to dwell into my story today, but some of the other stories of practicing intrapreneurs. And really, like I said, I'm not focusing on technology, but who are these disruptors? They are doing different things across different sectors in different organizations. How are they driving some of the impact? How are they talking about failure? How are they building momentum? Because you trial, you test, but you need to start demonstrating momentum. How do you build the environment? And what is happening now with the whole millennial movement and the people that are coming through the ranks that expect much more of business? So just a couple of stories from the people in the community of the Global League of Intrapreneurs. Now, Guy Bullock from Geneva, he set up Accenture's development partnerships. And probably not too dissimilar to the story that we heard from Pete. At Accenture, he was looking at he did some volunteer work in a really hard developing country, and he said, how come we have a whole infrastructure and organization full with really smart consultants? How do we start developing a business unit that not only does the work for the people that can pay the most, but probably the people that need it the most? So 15 years later, he set up the whole business unit for people that would actually have their salaries to volunteer and go and work in another country to help some of the not-for-profits doing this work. So how to start flipping business models to say, what is the impact that we can drive to our organization? So that's just Gabe. Another story around probably more new generation coming through and embracing failure and embracing different things. And I'll just play a very quick video.
Hi, I'm Carlos de la Rosa from Mexico City. I work in a building material company called Elementia in Mexico. We are an international group that it's held American, Mexican, Central American, Latin American companies. So what I think about intrapreneurship is the opportunity to make a transcendental change within the company and leveraging all the power, all the money of it, and all the people, all the resources they have to make it change. What we're doing right now in our company, we're positioning the benefit of our customers in front of us. And that's a big change of vision and also strategic change that is giving us the opportunity to visualize what we should do in order to give a long-term benefit to our customers, and by doing so, generate profit for the company. So it's a big change, and I would love to invite more of you to become entrepreneurs.
Now, we recently met in Rio with the Latin American League of Intrapreneurs and just understood some of the stories. The idea of the league is to start bringing together some of the practicing entrepreneurs to have a safe space to share learnings, share stories, but also support one another. Because these are the people that are facing one challenge after the other. And the resilience piece is really critical. Now, it might sound very obvious what he's doing, but when you put it in context, he shared with us the very first time he understood some of the issues that the company was facing. He said, we were in this talent program. There's this small group of young people being pinpointed to be the future leaders. We go to this plant and this man said, you guys, you need to see how men need to make decisions in this company. Yesterday, we didn't make the EBITDA number, so I fired 500 people. And this guy goes, that's not the company I can work for. What is going to be my role in start changing this from within? But you need to understand the system. You need to understand how it all works. You need to understand how to drive that change from within. And it's easier said than done. So I know, I've been there and I'm out. So that's probably it. I mean, another example very quickly, Tassi from Brazil. She works at one of the largest, imagine a Zara of Rio, okay? And for her, it's all about how do you reduce waste? What is the role in some of these organizations to actually start driving a much bigger change with sustainability?
My name is Tatiana from Brazil. I live in Rio de Janeiro, and I work in a fashion company in Brazil called Farm. And to be an entrepreneur is to be able to work with purpose and to actually, I think, a Gandhi phrase, that to be the change that you want to see in the world. So I like being a change agent inside a company and working with the company's assets and size and people and investment possibilities to do that. I think it's easier and harder, but I see the positive side more than the negative side. And right now I'm really passionate about circularity and circular economy and designing lots of new business models for clothes, for fashion, and for our textile residues to become more circular and to drive more value and opportunities from what was once just considered, like not even acknowledged. And it's been super interesting and very creative as well, because you can just dream about new possibilities and make them come true. So I think it's very exciting to be an entrepreneur today inside a company, because the world is changing and the companies need to change too, and we can help them do that.
Thank you so much, Tassi.
You're welcome.
So what Tassi is doing, they're mapping their entire value chain of the organization, saying at what point is there waste and what is it that we can do with it? Who do we need to partner? There's this whole trend about upcycling, saying, okay, what are all the clothes that didn't sell? What do we do with them? We can't just throw them away. We're in this consumption craze. I know I have 2 teenage daughters, so believe me, I know this sort of culture that some of these kids are being raised in our society. So what do you do with the things that are not using? How do you upcycle it? And then the people that then, after they use their clothes 5 or 6 times, how do we invite them to actually bring it back and then recycle some of that? But someone needs to lead this activity. Someone needs to identify, and even what's the revenue opportunities? There's, we do say, well, there can't always be a business case. Sometimes it has to be. And this has to align to the business strategy. So how do you start supporting these people? This is Cam, closer to home, Australia Post. And what was beautiful about Cam's story is that it was all about the environment. And I think we heard a lot from Peter around, as a leader, what do you do to support the people? What do you do to actually develop an environment that is going to support your entrepreneurs? Because we're not short of ideas. But the environment needs to actually help people enable that. And yes, people want to do, And and by the way, don't think that because it's a large organization, we have lots of resources. It's exactly what we said at the end. Just start with nothing. You know, some of the most incredible intrapreneurs start validating and testing and proving their case with hardly any or no budget at all. This is what people are doing. They're just getting on with it, validating, testing, trialing, building momentum. So for Cam, who set up he set up at Australia Post digital ID. So the whole digital ID space, which is obviously the future, and fascinating dynamics between working in a business when part of the business is completely declining, another part of the business is growing, and how do you manage that and help people in their journey? And probably the last story to share, it's very close to my heart. Like I said, when I see my teenage daughters and the expectations they have and the energy they have and the impact they want to make, it's more around what are millennials now looking for. Now, Milana moved recently from Serbia to Melbourne, used to work at Coca-Cola, HBC, and in terms of that power shift, and it was beautiful when she shared with us around, all of a sudden I realized I might just be new in the company, but there's many of us that think differently. There's many of us that want to see this organization change and change quickly. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. So just the last quick video.
I'm Milana, and I was an active social entrepreneur at Coca-Cola system. Being a millennial, having a purpose at my work and being able to make positive difference is very important for me. And this is why at one point in my career, I found myself in a way in a crossroad. Shall I stay in big organization, or shall I leave and start my own social enterprise? I realized that by staying in big organization and navigating the change from within, I was probably able to make a much bigger difference than if I stepped out and started my own journey. And what I realized is that I was not the only one. In fact, we created something that was called Millennial Movement. And I realized that being an entrepreneur is probably something that is a generational thing for us. I was really amazed to see what a group of passionate change makers can achieve when working together.
So I don't want to leave today and you feel that for intrapreneurs, it's all about those that've been in the organization that long, that really understand the politics, the dynamics. I think we have a huge wave of millennials and the new generation coming. I think my mic just went off, but I think I'm loud enough at the back. Yeah. Good. And for me, when I look at what the opportunities are, for us to start changing the narrative around, it's not just about getting a job or being an entrepreneur, which has been, there's so much energy and hype around everything that's happening on entrepreneurship, but what are the opportunities for intrapreneurs and the next generation of intrapreneurs? So that's what I wanted to land really today, just in terms of the stories that we cover, from impact to, going through the failure and accepting what that means, the momentum that needs to be built, the culture environment. And for many of you that might relate to this, I don't know what your story is, but I do want to make an open invitation. Tim Malberg is here. He's from the University of Sydney. I worked with him before. He's leading the Sydney chapter for the League of Intrapreneurs. As I said, safe community for intrapreneurs coming together to learn from another, to support one another, and to keep driving the change we need to see. I might not be in Mexico making a huge difference there, but for me, supporting, connecting, and helping in the entrepreneurship space, I believe is a huge, it's a huge way to try to make a bit of a difference. And I'm just going to leave you with that quote. Never doubt that a small group of people. Thank you.